And in this way, no one's space is sort of infiltrated. And but yet we can keep a track of these talks for people that miss a class. I can post them online, etc. Today's talk is about a subject called Shenpa. If you're not familiar with Shenpa, it's a Tibetan term that's used by some teachers, Pema Chodron, her teacher, Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche, as a replacement for the oft-used attachment. Attachment is generally considered to be problematic in meditation theory, right? And Shenpa also is a little more accurately descriptive. So the idea of Shenpa is that it translates to being hooked or ensnared or dragged. And we think of attachment as something that we do, like we're grabbing on something, and that is indeed the process. But that happens so quickly in our mind and so unconsciously or semi-consciously or subconsciously that by the time we're aware of it, we're ensnared in it. We're in the middle of klesha, which is the word that gets used as a Sanskrit term that means conflicting emotions. This way of fighting with ourselves, of feeling a certain way and not feeling we can really feel that way. And we get stuck in this blanket-like negativity, embroiled in this mental turbulence. Sometimes it's a pleasant experience. Sometimes we notice something and we want that thing and we become attached to that thing. But then that thing starts to drag us down the road. All of a sudden, next thing you know, we're fantasizing what it would be like to marry that thing, what it would be like to have that thing in our life and never have it leave us. And if you think it's cool or inappropriate that I'm referring to relationships as a thing, that's exactly what we do when we fixate. We turn a living, breathing situation or individual into an object. And when we create an object of that individual, they're no longer a living, breathing thing. They are our own projection. And if you've ever squeezed really hard on a projection, you know that when life pulls that away from you, how painful that is, or when the other person goes, I have my own say-so in this, and I don't see it your way. And all of a sudden, we've been dragged down this narrative, this road, this way of thinking, and we're kind of stuck. Because fixation never leads to satisfaction. It never leads to sustenance. Fixation is a mental phenomenon. It's a way of looking at something and deciding we need that or we need to hate that. And to be honest, we can be fixated, attached, cling and grasp onto negatives as well as positives. We think of it in terms of our desire leading and ensnaring us in this deviation from our path of stability and balance and serenity, that we notice something we want and we grab it and then it pulls us away from our balance. But the same thing happens when we look at something and hate that thing. We look at a political figure that we just can't cotton to and that gets stuck in our mind. Why someone else's evil could make us ruin our own lives is a kind of a strange thing. There's enough evil in the world that just happens without us suffering over our idea of things. That's not to say that we shouldn't take things personally. I think we should. I think we should even fall in love. I think we should jump wholeheartedly into the sea of our life. It's just Can we do that without getting stuck? Can we do that without getting hooked? The idea that we get pulled down the road, and next thing you know, this what seemed to be so innocent, this little flirtation has led us into a storm of turmoil. You know, start talking a little bit about someone who's upset you at work, and before you know it, it's become this big thing in your mind that ruins your sleep that night. And what in life is worth ruining our sleep, because that ruins the next day? How often do we just throw ourselves away on meaningless trivialities because we just get stuck in there and we can't let go of it? That doesn't mean that if something doesn't upset you, you don't acknowledge it fully and completely, but then let it go. That as soon as we've experienced the experience we were intended to experience, we then let it go. And we allow ourselves to move on to the next experience, you know? So in Buddhist teachings, classically, attachment is considered the antagonist to spiritual awareness and emotional balance. When we are acquisitive, as opposed to inquisitive, and that's an important distinction, our mind tends to cling to things. We're acquisitive. We are grabbing and holding and hoarding. We turn the objects that we fixate on into something solid, endowed with exaggerated importance. In some cases, this attachment leads to clinging, which turns to fixation. And fixation is the start of an addictive process. As with any addiction, our world becomes increasingly smaller as the object of our attachment begins to loom. It becomes so important to us. But yet, are we that important to them? And is it that important to the world around us? Or have we thrown ourselves out of balance because we're consumed with the energy of our addiction? Most problematically, attachment causes an impediment to the flow of our lives. It's as though life is like flowing down a river of time and space, and we're constantly grasping at straws to try to keep the flow from happening. Out of panic, we want to figure this out, or this person hurt our feelings, or that person looks so amazing to me, or whatever it is, we're constantly grabbing instead of just riding the flow of the middle way. That's what we're training to do in our meditation practice, is to pull ourselves back from the distraction, back into the flow of real awareness. And that is where the mind operates to its fullest potential. The mind is not at its fullest potential when it's thinking, ironically, because thinking is a lot of work and energy. Sometimes we need to think, and sometimes we need to figure things out. But after we're done, we need to rest and relax and create space around them. There's never been a time in the history of humankind, terribly sorry, that people didn't have rest, relaxation, and space the way we have done in contemporaneous society. Even in the ancient times, the cave person days, right? That, oft quoted tome of the cave people. But they largely spent their days asleep or in repose. They would go out and hunt. They would sometimes fight to protect themselves. But those times were the small amount of time expenditure. Mostly, they spent time making love, being with their families, and sleeping. We don't do any of that. We grab 5 hours of fitful sleep and wake up and push ourselves caffeinated down the road to the next thing. And that allows our nervous system to be at this high level of reactivity. We are not capable of responding to problems in our world when we don't have enough sleep, when we don't have enough hydration, when we don't have the appropriate kind of nutrition in our lives and energy and exercise. Without these kinds of physical elements of balance, our nervous system is in a reactive state. Something goes wrong and we blow up, we freak out. Some problem happens and we start going into overdrive trying to figure it all out mentally. That's just not an effective way to work. So working with attachment requires a loving approach. First of all, it's not our fault. It's not the fault of the object. And although there's a lot of support that addictions are encouraged by our materialistic society, it's not society's fault. What we could do is employ a loving methodology to begin to work to disabuse our minds of its need to attach out of panic and fear, or feeling that we are somehow going to be better if we acquire this thing or remove that thing, right? In this case, we are completely manipulating our environment and our experience instead of just being present in a relaxed, wakeful state and responding to what's actually happening. You say hello, and the person smiles and says hello. And your mind goes, ooh, that must mean, right? And you catch that. And you say, it's nice to see you. And they smile back and go, I'm kind of busy right now. And then you let it go. It goes exactly according to the way reality will go. And it's rarely the way you plan it or plot it or expect it to be. That creates so much pain when we think we know the way something is going to unfold and we just refuse to see what's actually happening, right? So there is a gentle, loving, but very specific approach that I've introduced before, and that I think many of you have experienced in other traditions, of course, which is the oft quoted, oft used, but I think very powerful RAIN: recognition, acceptance, internalization, investigation, and non-attachment. So I want to go through the steps really quickly. This is the way we can reduce our Shenpa, our attachment, our being stuck and being hooked in any situation. It all depends upon and rests upon the groundwork that we do on the cushion in our formal practice. And make no mistake, no matter who's told you, oh, everything is meditation, you can just walk through the room and meditate, that sitting down to formal practice, calming the nervous system, learning how to create space in the mind is essential for developing the kind of awareness that we need in order to kind of combat that incredible reactivity of our brains when they're stressed. We're training when we're not stressed. Each morning, sitting on the cushion, coming back lovingly, but insistently back to the breath. Allowing ourselves to support ourselves by bringing our attention back to ourselves and out of wherever the hell it is this goes, right? Coming back to now. Because while our mind is scheming, planning, plotting, and imagining what our world should be, our body is actually here experiencing it. And bringing the attention back lovingly, but insistently to here is coming back to the present moment. And we don't have to lock ourselves in the present moment, and we don't have to berate ourselves for deviating from the present moment. This is all ways that our brains have been well trained to not be here. So that work every morning in your formal practice, which I believe can be done every day. That's why it's called a daily practice. And that actually we sit, opening our heart, facing ourselves for 10 minutes, coming back to the breath. And if we do other practices, that could be added on to that time. If you have a beautiful golden morning, you could do an hour or half an hour, 3 hours of practice. But that 10 minutes of focused attention, coming back to the present moment, begins to train the mind. That is, it develops the new neural pathways, right? That are not subject to old patterns, but new neural pathways that begin to recognize when we're distracted and begin to create neural pathways that allow us the option to come back. The very first part of RAIN is recognition, but that's more than just noticing that I'm in Shenpa. It's actually noticing maybe how I got there, or even eventually when your mindfulness develops, noticing before it even happens that you're going to get stuck here if this happens. Alcoholics know that they can't go in certain environments because they're susceptible. Right? In the same way, we begin to learn about our mind and we begin to go, oh, these thoughts are going to lead me to Shenpa, to attachment, to fixation. I'm going to be stuck in this cycle of suffering all morning. That's just a terrible way to waste our time. Much better to waste our time doing nothing, which is actually therapeutic and replenishing. I'm not suggesting we only do nothing, but I am saying that idea of stressing is counterproductive. It's worse than wasting our time. It's debilitating and it's eroding. So when we notice that, we recognize that, we build the neural pathways that allow us to be able to see, oh, I'm stuck here. I'm stuck. That's a profound moment. Much, much more profound than you know. And when I work with newer students and my newer clients, I just have them do that for a period. Just recognition, recognizing when you're not present. The second step is very important that we go right into it almost immediately. I just contradicted myself. I said I encourage people to just look at, recognition for a week. But the second step of acceptance is super important. And in terms of the actual process, it almost goes hand in hand. Because if we recognize that we're stuck and then immediately hate that, we are still stuck. If we notice we're distracted and then berate ourselves for being distracted, we are still distracted. We haven't come back to anything. We're still in this hall of mirrors beating ourselves up. That is not the point. Recognition needs to go directly to acceptance, to opening the heart and really being able to kind of, accept the situation by releasing our grip on it and actually opening up. Acceptance means avoiding judgment, blame, or narratives of any kind, which are just further attachment. So recognition has to be followed by this opening and accepting and really, literally, physically letting go. Letting go. Now, letting go doesn't mean figuring out. It doesn't mean you have to resolve it. It's the opposite of that. It means let that go. Let it go. Just let space in for a moment. Recognize you're stuck, accept, let space. The third, which is the I, is investigating, right? So we immediately accept our situation by physically letting go of the gripping. And that gripping, when we're stuck, happens in our mind, but it also happens in our body. If you're really stuck on something and there's some compulsive thinking happening, there's a corresponding tension in your body, I promise you. So the investigation begins to look into the body and go, where am I hurting myself? Where am I throwing myself out of balance? What am I squeezing here? How does this stomach all tight help me with anything right now? And we just take for granted that, yeah, if we're stressed, our stomach's going to be tight. Well, no, it's our choice. We just inherit the tight stomach because we weren't aware of it, because we haven't developed our mindfulness yet. But that's okay, because when you notice yourself a ball of tension, release the tension. I had a yoga teacher, Alan Finger, some of you might know, from New York, an old school tradition, kind of in New York. And he used to say in his yoga instruction, if it hurts, stop doing it. Don't even think twice about it. If you're sitting there and there's tension in your body, release the tension. Don't figure anything out. Don't work through it. But heavens, don't just accept that you have to suffer like that because somebody yelled at you. They didn't put that tension in your belly. You are doing it. And you have the ability to release that by becoming aware. You recognize it and you open, which is what accepting is. You accept it and you open it. And the investigation part is we really go in and kind of look and go, where is it about us here, right? Not fixating on the object of our fixation, but actually looking inside and going, what is it that I need? Why am I grabbing so hard at this? What is it about me and my life that has made this person hurt me so much? What is it about me and my life that has made me have to have this person in my life to the extent of ruining a relationship with them because it's not normal, you know? What is it about me that is creating this problem? Now, this is not a blame. This follows on the acceptance. It's real investigation. What is it that I actually need? And the end, I like, there's lots of intellectual and kind of Buddhist-y approaches to the end, like non-ego, non-engagement, non-identification, and all of those are very good. But I love Tara Brach's approach, who comes completely from left field and says it's about nurturing, right? Non-identification is not about cutting something out, like stop identifying. It's about learning to love the part of you that is grabbing. What is it you're looking for? Why are you picking up that drink? Why are you fixated on that person? Why are you going on and on in your brain about something that's upset you? What is it that you need right now? And if you need a hug or need to be held or need to be listened to, the first step of all of those things for a practitioner is to do it on the cushion, is to bring it to the cushion. And in some way, we actually can become the loving, caring, wise adult and parent that many of us didn't have. And many of us had wonderful parents, but they were in their early 20s and crazy and doing the best they can and under this incredible pressure that our materialistic world forces people into, and themselves stuck in the occlusion of Shenpa. We need to break the chains of these kind of aggressive, abusive, occluded relationships and actually begin to learn to become independent, not codependent. So nurturing leads us to this state of what the Buddha called sosotarpa, or individual liberation. Liberation from what? From our reliance on what other people think. Liberation from our need to have other people confirm us and support us. Our liberation from the debt we feel to explain ourselves to anyone. None of that needs to happen. All of that can be cut with the knife of prajna, and that's something that we'll talk about next week. But we develop in our meditation practice this wisdom that allows us to actually see through all the icky, codependent crap, all the ways that we are manipulating our world and trying to get people to fall in love with us simply because our parents broke up and we have to relive that scenario again and again and again, or whatever our programming is. We are not subject to our programming. We need to accept it, and we need to love it and investigate it and begin to find the ways that we can nurture ourselves so that we're not clinging and grasping. And finally, I want to say there is one way that many of us, including myself, are addicted is, by food. Food is the way that I tried to love myself, or more often tried to ignore my feelings by filling myself up. I told you that story that somebody in a meditation center, Carmen Choling, found me at 3 o'clock in the morning eating a bowl of carbs, cereals with nuts, and a big blob of peanut butter put on top. And they said, "Oh, what do you call that?" I said, "I call it shut the fuck up." A bowl of shut the fuck up. And I was kind of talking to this person that was invading my little animal-like bovine blissful space, but also that's what I was doing to myself. I was filling up space, attaching to the wonderful flavors to lose myself in this so that I could forget myself and then feel completely bloated and disgusted and go to sleep somehow with fitful, nervous sleep that we have when our stomach is full. It's completely counterproductive. But it taught me something. It taught me how much I really am devoting so much attention to shutting down some part of myself, to not letting myself be, not letting myself breathe, not letting myself feel, not letting myself become liberated. Well, I started working on my weight. You can tell probably that I haven't gone very far, but it's gone back and forth. But I become way more aware of it. And my health is very good for my age. And actually, one of the things that I've learned, and some of you know this from your work with nutrition, is that if I preemptively eat nutrition-based foods, I will be less hungry. If I preemptively drink water in the morning or through the day, whether I'm thirsty or not, I will be less hungry. If I preemptively eat a green veggie drink, or drink a green veggie drink even, although usually they're so thick I eat them partially, I'm not so hungry for 0 calorie, high carb, salty stuff, I don't need it. But in the same way, emotionally, if we do our meditation practice and include after that 10 minutes, 5 minutes of heart practice, where we really begin to try to connect to our heart and our compassion with the point and purpose of learning to be the supportive partner we need, learning to be the supportive parent that we need, to learning to be the supportive boss that we need in our mind, to be our own guru, our own teacher, our own guide, and to actually begin to find some sense of self-regard and self-love so we don't have to be clinging and grasping to these things in our world that try to make us feel better. Because that trick never works. It really doesn't. It only makes us feel worse. It makes us feel poverty stricken. And it never works out, so it makes us also feel like we're losers. We're not getting what we want because we're not wanting what we need. So anyway, RAIN is recognition, acceptance, investigation, and then nurturing to non-attachment. You could say it that way. There's lots of different ways to look at this and a lot written about it. I love Pema Chodron's work. I love Tara Brach's work, but that's me. And I recommend that you find some way to it yourself and look into it. So that's what I've got today. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this.